The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are.
I can tell you from experience, the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is.
Don't think, feel. It is like a finger pointing away to the moon. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
We're in Los Angeles.
Correct.
Besides the fantastic weather, why do you live here?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you, man.
That's a good question. So I originally moved here in 2012 because I wanted to be an actor more regularly. When I was in Austin, I was just doing it sporadically at best. You know, I went to all the castings. It's a limited market there. Mm-hmm. So prior to leaving, I made a plan. I said, okay, I'm going to move to Los Angeles in 1 year, and I'm going to be a great actor. That's what I'm going to be. So I need to start working towards that thing. So I'm going to start saving money, and I'm going to start doing all the things that, you know, my arbitrary checklist of things that I ought to do in order to get to the point where I can say I've done the things that I need necessary to be a great actor. This is harder than it sounds, by the way. So I knew I had to do the theater, and I did a great show called August Osage County, mm-hmm. which is, anybody who's familiar with it, they made a film about it with Julia Roberts and Meryl Streep, and
a vastly inferior film.
Vastly inferior. In fact, they cut out the role that I was, which was Sheriff Dion Gilbo. I was in the first and the third act, and that was kind of like stepping in with professionals. You know, everybody who was on that project with me had lived in New York, had lived in Los Angeles, had done films, TV, everything. And at that point, I was just, you know, doing the occasional guest spot on a pilot that was shooting in Austin, or commercial or print ad. You pretty much knew everybody in town who fit like the same age range. Very small community at that time. It was only 4 years ago. But so then I was going to save money, and then I was going to come out here and work primarily as an actor. And the camp was kind of split. Like half the people were saying, "Oh, you need to, you know, build up more credits before you do that," and the other half was like, "You're one of the ones that's going to make it, man. You could do this thing." And I felt very confident. And so I moved out here in April 2nd of 2012, and it took me about 2.5 months to hook up with a commercial talent agency. And I was, you know, I kind of scoped it out in the first couple months, and I knew that, all right, I wanted to be on the west side, I wanted to be close to the water. Mm-hmm. I knew that surfing was going to be a part of my life, so I definitely needed to be close enough to the water that I could do that regularly. But then to like sort of begin to answer your question, not just talk about my acting background. The city is powerful, and it got a powerful hold on me very early. And maybe not the way that you would think. I immediately started going to LACMA regularly, which is the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And it just was like a magnet. Like, I just love being at that place. I draw so much inspiration from looking at the paintings and sculpture and the design of the place. Insane. So that was one. The Getty Centers. One, the Getty Villa in Malibu has the ancient Roman and Greek collection. And then the Getty Center up at the top of the hill on the 405 is a much more broad range of art, from contemporary to, you know, very old installations of like biblical art and all kinds of stuff. I'm not doing that institution justice, but needless to say, it's a famous museum that is very strong, comparable. LACMA is more comparable to, say, the Tate Modern in London, or MoMA. And the ocean, of course. Malibu's beautiful. I started going to farmers markets regularly. There's a farmers market in Austin, but it was like once a week. Here, everything grows. It's very fertile. It's Eden-like. So there's a different farmers market every day. Gold's Gym, Venice, the Mecca, was 2 blocks from where I ultimately live now. And that was very important. I was like, I gotta get to the gym to lift. And I want to lift in the greatest gym in the world. And as we've talked about in past episodes, you regularly see the Arnolds, the Lou's, the Mr. Olympia, former Mr. Olympias, the athletes, celebrities. It's just a place where everyone goes to train hard. So I had the training aspect, I had the acting aspect, and I had the ocean. And since then, I've discovered downtown, East LA, Miracle Mile, West Hollywood, North Hollywood, Burbank, Pasadena, Marina Del Rey, Santa Monica, every West LA proper. Every neighborhood is just like in a completely different city. And it's just gives me the impression of a lifetime of exploration and value and inspiration to be gained just by cruising around, the city that I live. London, I'm sure, is the same way. Well, we'll get to that in a second, but Austin wasn't like that. Austin's a cool city, and I was there for many years because it's so cool, and it's still cool. But it's much more like New York in the way that Brooklyn is completely different from Astoria, which is completely different from the East, Upper East Side, etc. So now the thing that keeps me here is just this incredible amount of art, music. I haven't even begun to touch on the music or the food scene, but those are other aspects. Like everything that I want in a city, plus big players, because you have all that in New York in terms of city stuff. But then when you talk about natural resources, New York doesn't have waves. I guess you have to go to Long Island and there's surf there, but you got to go way out. It's not like you could just bounce from your 34th floor apartment down to ride a wave. You can do that here. And in 2 hours, you could be snowboarding, up in the mountains in Big Bear. So technically, I could wake up in the morning and surf, do a bunch of museum and cool cultural stuff during the day, snowboard in the afternoon, and come back for a whole evening of nightlife. And I don't know of any other city in the world that has that.
Wow. It's making me want to move out here.
What's the longest you've ever lived in a single city? And number one, why did you stay? And why did you leave?
Longest was obviously where I grew up in Cape Town. I lived there for almost 23 years.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, from birth until about 23. And then I left just to expand my horizons. But since then, it's been London. And I always say that I used to say that London would be amazing. It would be the best city in the world if it had decent weather. But lately, I'm not even so sure about that. I'm kind of, I think what a lot of people find with big cities, at least I've found, is that you get to a point where once you've lived in a big city for long enough, it just switches. And just all the things that you're attracted to it, especially in your 20s, like that vibrancy and that energy and that cosmopolitan, swirling, melting pot of like people coming to live their dreams and build something and see the world and expand. There came a point for me where it just turned in on itself, and now I find that drains me more than it energizes me. In most big cities, man, like London being the most, I find it most of all. And that's probably because it's dismal and grey, like 300 days a year. But
brutal.
Yeah, LA is one of the big cities I've found that actually is not so much like that, because I think it's partly because it's so spread out, and because also the elements are so good here. Like even though there's a lot of pollution and stuff, there's very often like a nice cool breeze coming off the city, especially in this part of LA. And just the weather's just, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. But I don't know, I'm sure you've noticed it, but there is definitely a strange sort of a current of energy in this part of the world, and I've never figured out what it is, but I know it's the reason that the people who weave the spells, aka Hollywood, base themselves out here. I think they are tapping into that energy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, but I'm trying to approach what I think you're getting at practically, and I think that the reason why they started shooting out here initially was because of the weather. It just allowed for more days of natural light so that they could, you know, shoot 300 days a year if they wanted to, or 350. But that being said, I think there is strange energy maybe that has been brought here because of the desperation that goes along with the industry.
Could be.
And maybe those things, you know, need each other in order to survive.
That's a good point, Thomas. That's a really good point. I just find what I love about LA is it's a love-hate thing for me, that feeling. Sometimes I'll be walking on the street and you'll just tap into a vein of it and you'll be like, wow, I could do anything. And other times you walking down the street and you tap into a vein of it and you feel, fuck, this city has chewed up and spat out a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, having been on both sides of that, I usually defer to the natural elements to clean it all out. If I'm feeling particularly chewed up and spat out, I'll get in the water, and the water is cold, and it's a great equalizer, and you go, oh, fuck, that is, you know, you just sort of, it forces you to be present, and the missed opportunities, or what you might perceive to be missed opportunities, don't seem that big of a deal anymore. Or you can climb and get very high in a couple of senses. Like if you climb up into the Santa Monica Mountains such that you're able to look way off in the distance and see downtown LA, and way off in the other direction and see, you know, what would be north of that. Not, you can't quite see to Santa Barbara, but you can see to the end of Malibu from there. And you just see such a vast expanse, and you talked about this before, when you can get so high above the ants running around to and fro and just sort of be detached from it. That audition that you know, felt like was a face lottery, or, you know, the investors that you didn't impress because they've seen it all just seems pretty paltry. And that is, I don't feel like I had that necessarily in Austin, and I definitely don't know where one would find that in, say, a Paris or a London. Just to be able to extract yourself and yet be close enough that you can, you know, make sense of things and get a realistic view. But here it's very easy. You just go up or you go into the water.
It's a good way to put it. I just find, you said you were speaking about the practical, examples of what I was speaking about, which is that energy. And I can't think of too many, but another one that jumps to mind is on this planet now there's a very strong current of technological progress. And there's the information age is rapidly disseminating itself into every single part of the life of human beings on this planet, and in this realm. And it seems to me that that's all the starting point for most of that, or the epicenter for most of that is out here as well. You know, there's a reason Facebook and Microsoft and Google and everyone has their offices just a few miles away. And I just find it strange that those two forces, the one being information technology and the other one being the spell that is media, are both centered here, and they're both symbiotic, and they're both working their roots or growing their branches out over the planet from this point. I just find that quite interesting. And it might just be confirmation bias in me joining dots where there aren't dots to be joined. but I have a feeling there's something to it. I mean, there's a reason Tim Ferriss got in his van and drove out to LA, and he didn't drive to Wisconsin or didn't get on a plane to Paris. You know, there's a reason. Fuck, I don't know. Think of, I don't know. There's a reason Brad Pitt left wherever he was from and came here and stood in a chicken suit on corners for fucking months before he got his break, because he knew this is where he had to be, you know,
Right.
to do it. And I'm wondering if that's the pull that brought you here.
Oh yeah, I should have answered that more completely as well. So when it came time to go, you know, because I had flirted for years with, okay, I'm gonna quit everything and go pursue being a performer full time. That was what I was gonna do right after I graduated from high school, and I got sidetracked because I was convinced by my parents that university was the wiser way to, you know, go about it. You need a plan B, they always say.
Mm-hmm.
You need a plan B. At the time in 2011 when I decided I'm gonna be a great actor, you can be a great actor in New York or Los Angeles. And at the end of the day, the weather was enough of a pull for me that I didn't want. I was in New York in 2003 when I was modeling, and I mean, I love that city. It has a lot of similar elements, but I couldn't go through the winters.
Oh man.
It's such a softy thing to
No,
say,
but
like, oh, I can't deal with the winter, but I mean, I could, but why would I?
Why the fuck should I?
Why?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's something that I keep thinking about a lot. It's a little story I related to you already, but for the benefit of the listeners, I'm going to tell you again. I was with some friends when we were in Thailand. We had just done this jungle hike and a magic mushroom trip, and the trip was wearing off, and we were all out in the jungle staring up at the stars and the moon, just waxing on about life, right? And my one friend, a young kid, I can see this itching. He's been in Thailand for a while, and he's like itching to get back out into the real world, right? And he was saying, oh, it's a waste of your talents to be here, or waste of our collective talents. Do you ever think it's a waste of our collective talents to be here? And I said to him, you know, I get that feeling sometimes. And our one friend was sitting down next to us, and like some context about this guy, Chris, is he had worked for a big bank on Wall Street, and he was so overworked and stressed, and that lifestyle would messed him up so much. He had a collapsed lung twice, hospitalized. And that was a turning point in his life. He said, I've got to do something else. And he ended up going out to Thailand, and he's been there for a few years. And he just blurted out, he was like, man, it doesn't have to be hard all the time, right? It doesn't have to, and it struck me. I'm like, is that programming? Is it programming that we have to be struggling, and that you're only doing something valuable to the world when you are fucking on the edge or scared or burnt out? I don't know. My current perspective is that, again, it's that balance point. And if you go lie on a beach drinking from coconuts your whole life, I personally would be bored out of my fucking mind. But at the same time, if I'm constantly overworked and stressed and chained to something I don't want to do, I think that's going to be even worse. So I'm sure you're the same. We're trying to find that happy, like, middle ground.
Yeah, I was going to make it a separate question, which is, do you need to suffer in order to make good art? And there's a really strong case for that. You know, I mean, last year I went to London and Paris on a trip with a friend of mine, and we had a really long discussion about how the new school of painters came out of New York and not Los Angeles. And he cited example after example of great artists that went to New York to make it happen. He was implying that you need that winter to suffer through in order to be able to come through with the inspiration that the spring brings. And there's a lot to that. Radiohead, I think, is probably one of the best bands that has ever been. And those guys did not come out of Orange County. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
There have been lots of bands out of Southern California and that are really good, Tool being one of them, LA. But I think a lot of the greats came out of like a place where the elements have a huge influence on their psyches.
Interesting. I'm not quite sold on the fact that the correlation is 1-to-1 or that there's a causation there. But it is an interesting point, Thomas.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'd like to ask all our listeners and viewers, can you guys please head over to digitalcommunion.com, and you'll find the iTunes link on there. If you can just click through and leave us a review, we'd really appreciate that. And also, if you want to leave a comment on one of our episodes, you can do it from there. We'd appreciate that. Until next time, my brother.
Peace to you and peace to everyone listening and watching. We really do appreciate it.